The day everything changed. The smell of smoke still lingered in the air 3 days after the fire. I stood outside what used to be my sister's apartment building, watching investigators move through the charred remains like ghosts in a graveyard. My name is Maya Richardson, I'm 23 years old, and the police just told me my sister's death was an accident. But I knew better. Sarah wasn't careless. She was a brilliant accountant who triple-checked everything, from her coffee order to her financial reports. The idea that she would leave a candle burning or forget to turn off the stove was impossible. Yet here I was, being told that my only family in this world died because of negligence. Miss Richardson, I'm very sorry for your loss, Detective Morrison said, approaching me with that practiced sympathy they teach at the police academy. We've completed our investigation. The fire started in your sister's apartment, due to an electrical fault in an old lamp. These things happen in older buildings. I stared at him, feeling anger rise in my chest like a tide. Sarah reported problems with her apartment to the landlord 6 times in the past 2 months. She documented everything. Don't you find that suspicious? The detective shifted uncomfortably. Old buildings have issues. Without evidence of foul play, we have to close the case as accidental death. Taking matters into my own hands. That night, I sat in my small studio apartment surrounded by everything I had managed to salvage from Sarah's place. Her laptop had survived, protected in a fireproof safe she kept under her bed. As I powered it on, my hands trembled with a mixture of grief and determination. Sarah's files were meticulously organized, as always. But one folder caught my attention immediately. Discrepancies do not delete. Inside were spreadsheets, photographs, and emails that painted a disturbing picture. My sister had discovered something huge at her accounting firm. Money was being moved through shell companies, millions of dollars disappearing into offshore accounts. The name that appeared most frequently in her notes was Stone Industries, one of the largest real estate development companies in the city. And at the center of it all was a name that made my blood run cold. Kieran Stone, the young CEO who had taken over the family business 2 years ago. I made a decision that night. If the police wouldn't investigate Sarah's death properly, I would do it myself. I quit my job as a graphic designer the next morning and devoted every waking hour to understanding the web of corruption my sister had uncovered. The charity gala. 6 weeks later, I stood in front of my mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. The sleek black evening gown hugged my curves perfectly, and my normally wild brown hair was styled into an elegant updo. I had transformed myself from grieving sister to sophisticated socialite for one purpose: to get close to Kieran Stone. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala was the biggest social event of the season, and Stone Industries was the primary sponsor. I had used every connection I could find to secure an invitation, finally succeeding through a former college friend whose mother sat on the hospital board. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of expensive conversations. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, my eyes scanning the crowd for my target. Then I saw him. Kieran Stone stood near the center of the room, surrounded by admirers but somehow appearing completely alone. He was taller than I expected, probably 6'3", with dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead in a way that suggested he didn't spend much time worrying about his appearance. His suit was clearly custom-made, fitting his broad shoulders perfectly. But it was his eyes that caught me off guard, deep gray like storm clouds, and carrying a weight that seemed at odds with his 30-year-old face. The encounter. "You're staring," a smooth voice said beside me. I turned to find an older woman with silver hair and knowing eyes. At Kieran Stone. "Can't say I blame you, dear. He's quite the catch. Also quite unavailable emotionally speaking. That young man carries the weight of the world on his shoulders." "I wasn't," I started, but she cut me off with a gentle laugh. "Of course you were. Everyone does. But let me give you some advice. Kieran Stone is not what he appears to be. There's more to that boy than the tabloids suggest." She patted my arm and disappeared into the crowd before I could ask what she meant. I was still processing the strange encounter when I felt a presence behind me. The air seemed to shift, becoming charged with an energy that made my skin tingle. "I don't believe we've met." The voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of something rough around the edges. I turned slowly, forcing myself to appear calm even though my heart was racing. Kieran Stone stood less than 2 feet away, those gray eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me forget to breathe. Up close, he was even more striking. A strong jawline, full lips that seemed made for smiling though they currently held a serious expression, and a small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him more attractive rather than less. "Maya Richardson," I said, extending my hand with what I hoped was confident grace. "I'm new to these events. A friend suggested I attend." His hand engulfed mine warm and strong, sending an unexpected shock of electricity up my arm. He held the handshake a moment longer than necessary, his eyes never leaving mine. "Kieran Stone. And you're lying." My blood turned to ice. "Excuse me. You're not new to these events. You might be new to attending them, but you've studied them carefully. Your dress is designer but last season, purchased carefully to blend in without appearing to try too hard. Your jewelry is good quality but not ostentatious. And the way you've been observing the room for the past 10 minutes suggests you're looking for someone specific." His lips quirked into a half-smile. "So the question is, Miss Richardson, who are you really and why are you here?" Dangerous games. I should have been terrified that he'd seen through my disguise so quickly. Instead, I found myself oddly thrilled by the challenge. "You're very observant, Mr. Stone. Has anyone ever told you that can be an off-putting quality?" "Frequently," he replied, his smile widening slightly. "But it's kept me alive in business, so I consider it a worthwhile character flaw." "You still haven't answered my question." I took a sip of champagne, buying time to think. Maybe I'm a journalist working on a story. Or a private investigator. Or maybe I'm just a woman who wanted to attend a charity gala and is now regretting it because she's being interrogated by a paranoid CEO. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement maybe, or respect. "If you were a journalist, you'd have approached me directly with a recorder running. If you were a private investigator, you'd be better at blending in. So that leaves option 3, except I don't believe that either." "Why not?" "Because you've been staring at me with a very specific look in your eyes. Not attraction, though there's some of that too." He said this so casually that I felt heat rise to my cheeks. But something else. Something that looks remarkably like hatred mixed with determination. My heart pounded. He was too perceptive, too dangerous. I needed to get away and regroup. But before I could make an excuse to leave, the lights in the ballroom suddenly went out. Chaos and protection. Screams erupted around us as the room plunged into darkness. I felt bodies pushing past me, panic spreading like wildfire through the crowd. Then strong arms wrapped around me, pulling me close against a solid chest. "Stay still," Kieran's voice commanded in my ear. "Don't move." "What's happening?" I whispered, my earlier animosity forgotten in the face of immediate danger. "I don't know yet, but something's wrong. This isn't a simple power outage." He was right. Through the chaos I heard sounds that didn't belong. Breaking glass, running footsteps, and what might have been gunshots in the distance. My breath came in short gasps as fear replaced curiosity. Kieran's arms tightened around me protectively. "Listen to me carefully, Maya. When the emergency lights come on, I'm going to guide you to the service exit. Don't ask questions, don't hesitate, just follow my lead." "Understood." "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "Call it instinct," he murmured. "Or maybe I'm curious about why someone would go to such elaborate lengths to get close to me. Either way, I'd prefer to have this conversation when we're not in immediate danger." The emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. True to his word, Kieran immediately began moving us through the panicked crowd with surprising ease. His hand gripped mine firmly, and I noticed how he positioned himself between me and any potential threats, his body acting as a shield. We reached a service door that required a code. Kieran punched in numbers without hesitation, and the door swung open to reveal a narrow corridor. He pulled me through and locked it behind us. "How did you know the code?" I asked, breathless from our escape. "I own the building," he replied simply. "Now let's get you somewhere safe, and then you're going to tell me the real reason you're here." The revelation. Kieran led me through a maze of service corridors to a private office I assumed was his. It was surprisingly modest. No expensive artwork or excessive displays of wealth, Just a functional space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He locked the door behind us and turned to face me, his expression serious. "The police are handling whatever happened out there," he said, checking his phone briefly. "Looks like it was a robbery attempt on the jewelry displays in the lobby. Poor planning on their part, hitting a venue full of people." He set his phone down and crossed his arms. "Now, the truth, Maya Richardson. Why are you investigating me?" I realized in that moment that I had two choices: continue the charade or gamble on honesty. Something about the way he protected me, the genuine concern in his eyes, made me choose the latter. "My sister died 6 weeks ago in a fire," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "The police ruled it an accident, but it wasn't. She discovered something. Financial irregularities, money laundering, I'm not entirely sure. But your company's name was all over her files." Kieran's expression didn't change, but I saw something shift in his eyes. "Your sister's name? Sarah Richardson. She was an accountant at Morrison Financial Group." He moved to his desk and pulled out a tablet, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Sarah Richardson," he repeated slowly. "I remember that name. She sent several emails to my office about discrepancies in accounts we held with Morrison Financial." He looked up at me, and I was shocked to see what looked like genuine regret in his eyes. "I was planning to meet with her, but then I heard about the fire. I'm sorry for your loss, Maya." "Don't," I said, anger flaring. "Don't you dare pretend to care. Your company's fingerprints are all over whatever got her killed." "You're right," he said quietly, and that stopped me cold. "My company is involved, but not in the way you think." He turned the tablet toward me, showing financial records that made my head spin. "For the past year, I've been conducting my own investigation into my father's former business partner, Marcus Blackwood. He's been using Stone Industries as a front for money laundering, and I've been gathering evidence to bring him down. Your sister's work would have helped expose him. A difficult choice." I stared at the evidence in front of me, my carefully constructed narrative of revenge crumbling. "If this is true, why haven't you gone to the police?" "Because Marcus has connections everywhere. Police, politicians, judges. I need irrefutable evidence and the right moment to strike. Going too early would only tip him off and let him disappear." Kieran moved closer, his gray eyes intense. "But now there's another problem. If you've been investigating me, Marcus's people might have noticed. You could be in danger, Maya." "I can take care of myself," I said automatically, though my confidence was shaken. "Can you?" He gestured toward the locked door. "What happened tonight, the robbery, the timing, it might not have been a coincidence. Marcus has tried to intimidate me before by targeting people in public settings. If he knows you're connected to Sarah, if he thinks you have information." The implications hung in the air between us. I had come here tonight seeking vengeance against the man I thought killed my sister. Instead, I found myself standing in his office, learning that we might actually be on the same side. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, hating the vulnerability in my voice. Kieran reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a file folder, handing it to me. "Because I've been compiling everything I could find about your sister's case. I had my own investigators looking into the fire because her death seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed to stop her investigation." I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were photographs, reports, and documents that clearly showed someone had tampered with the electrical system in Sarah's apartment. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. And the evidence pointed directly to someone in Marcus Blackwood's organization. Tears burned my eyes as the truth finally came into focus. He killed her. And the police just closed the case. "I know," Kieran said softly. "And I'm sorry I didn't move faster. If I had met with Sarah sooner, maybe." "Don't," I interrupted, echoing his earlier words. "Don't do that to yourself. This is on the person who gave the order." I looked up at him, seeing him clearly for the first time not as my enemy, but as a potential ally. "So what do we do now?" A determined look crossed his face. "Now we work together. You have Sarah's files and I have resources and insider knowledge. Together, we might actually be able to take Marcus down and get justice for your sister." He extended his hand toward me. "Partners." I looked at his outstretched hand, my mind racing. This wasn't how I had planned for tonight to go. I was supposed to infiltrate his world, gather evidence, and destroy him. Instead, I found myself considering an alliance with the man I had blamed for my sister's death. But as I looked into those storm-gray eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. Sincerity, determination, and a shared hunger for justice that mirrored my own. I took his hand. Partners. But Kieran, if you're lying to me, if any of this is a trick, I will make you regret it. His lips curved into a slight smile as his hand closed around mine. I wouldn't expect anything less, Maya Richardson. Something tells me you and I are going to make a formidable team. As we stood there in his office, hands clasped in an unlikely alliance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped onto a path that would change everything. I had come here for revenge. Instead, I found something far more dangerous. A partner I was already beginning to trust, and an attraction I knew I should fight but wasn't sure I could. The game had changed, and I was no longer sure whether Kieran Stone was my enemy, or something much more complicated. Part 2: Flames of Desire. The new plan. The morning after the gala, I sat in Kieran's downtown office, nursing my third cup of coffee and trying to process everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. Kieran sat across from me, looking frustratingly alert despite the late night, reviewing Sarah's files on his computer with the focused intensity one was beginning to recognize as his default mode. "Your sister was brilliant," he said, not looking up from the screen. "She found connections that my forensic accountants missed. Marcus has been moving money through at least 7 different shell companies, each one carefully designed to look legitimate. Sarah always had a gift for seeing patterns," I replied, my throat tight with grief that still felt too fresh. She could look at numbers and see stories that others missed. Kieran's eyes lifted to meet mine, and I saw genuine sympathy there. "We're going to make sure her work wasn't in vain, Maya. I promise you that." "Don't make promises you can't keep," I said, more harshly than I intended. "Sarah's dead, and promises won't bring her back." Instead of taking offense, Kieran simply nodded. "You're right. But what I can promise is that I won't stop until Marcus Blackwood faces justice for what he did." "Will that do?" Before I could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "Marcus is holding a board meeting this afternoon. He's pushing for approval on a new development project, a luxury apartment complex on the waterfront." "Let me guess," I said, my investigative instincts kicking in. "Another opportunity for money laundering?" "Exactly. The project is overvalued by at least $40 million. That money will disappear into his pocket through inflated construction costs and phantom contractors." Kieran set his phone down, a calculating look in his eyes. "But it also gives us an opportunity. If we can get inside his operation, document the fraud as it happens, we'll have the evidence we need." "How do we do that?" "It's not like he's going to invite us to witness his crimes." A slight smile played at Kieran's lips. "No, but he might invite you to join Stone Industries. We have an opening in our accounting department. With your graphic design background and your sister's files, we could position you as a financial visualization specialist, someone who creates presentations and reports for investors. You'd have legitimate access to financial data, and Marcus wouldn't suspect a newly hired employee of being a threat." Joining the enemy's world. 2 weeks later, I walked into Stone Industries headquarters wearing a conservative gray suit and carrying a briefcase that felt like a costume prop. Kieran had been right. Marcus Blackwood had personally approved my hiring, apparently pleased that Kieran was expanding the financial communications team. My cubicle was on the same floor as the executive offices, close enough to observe but not so close as to raise suspicion. As I set up my computer and organized my desk, I couldn't help noticing how many people watched Kieran throughout the day. He moved through the office with quiet authority, speaking to employees, reviewing projects, and somehow managing to make everyone feel valued with just a few words. "He's different than the old man," a voice said beside me. I turned to find a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I'm Patricia, head of accounting. You must be Maya." "That's me," I said, shaking her offered hand. "Different how?" "Kieran's father built this company on fear and intimidation. Kieran's building it on respect and innovation. Not everyone appreciates the change, but those of us who've been here long enough to remember what it used to be like. We'd follow him anywhere. Her words planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Everything I learned about Kieran contradicted my initial assumptions. He wasn't the corrupt businessman I had imagined. He was complicated, principled in ways that surprised me, and far more alone than someone in his position should be. Dangerous proximity. Working closely with Kieran proved to be both enlightening and dangerous. Dangerous because the more time I spent with him, the harder it became to maintain professional distance. He was brilliant, there was no denying that. But he was also unexpectedly kind, with a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard and a way of looking at me that made my pulse race. "You're frowning at that spreadsheet like it personally offended you," Kieran said one evening, appearing beside my desk long after most employees had gone home. I jumped, startled. "I didn't hear you coming. I've been told I move like a ghost," he said with a slight smile. "What are you working on?" "Trying to trace one of the shell companies Marcus uses. The money trail goes cold in the Cayman Islands, and I can't figure out where it surfaces again." Kieran pulled up a chair, sitting close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and subtle that made me want to lean closer. "May I?" For the next hour, we worked together, Kieran's expertise in financial structures complementing my visual pattern recognition. We made a good team, finishing each other's sentences, building on each other's ideas with an ease that felt almost intimate. "There," I said finally, highlighting a connection we'd both missed. "The money comes back through a construction company that Marcus's brother-in-law owns. It's been hiding in plain sight." "You're amazing," Kieran said softly, and when I turned to look at him I found his face inches from mine. "Sarah would be proud of you." The moment stretched between us, charged with an electricity I couldn't ignore. His eyes dropped to my lips, and I found myself leaning in almost unconsciously. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the spell. "Sorry," he said, pulling back and checking the message. His expression darkened. "It's Marcus. He wants to meet with both of us tomorrow morning about the waterfront project. He's going to try to bring you in as part of the presentation team." "Is that good or bad?" "Both," Kieran replied. "It means he trusts you enough to involve you in the project. But it also means you'll be directly exposed to his operation. If he suspects anything, you'll be in danger." The first test. The meeting with Marcus Blackwood was everything I had feared and more. He was a large man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of smile that never reached his cold blue eyes. He sat at the head of the conference table like a king holding court, his expensive suit and gold watch screaming wealth acquired through decades of corruption. "Miss Richardson," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "Kieran speaks very highly of your work. I understand you have a talent for making complex financial data accessible to investors." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I believe transparency is key to building investor confidence." Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or suspicion. "Transparency. Yes, quite important." He slid a folder across the table. "I'd like you to prepare a presentation for our waterfront development project. We're seeking additional investors, and we need materials that highlight the project's potential." I opened the folder, scanning the numbers that I knew were fraudulent. "Of course. When do you need it?" "End of the week." "And Maya?" He leaned forward slightly. "I knew your sister. Sarah was a talented accountant. Very thorough. Almost too thorough, if you understand my meaning." The threat was barely veiled. My hands clenched under the table, but I forced myself to smile. Sarah always said attention to detail was everything in this business. "Indeed," Marcus agreed, his smile widening. "I hope you've inherited her skills but perhaps have better judgment about which details deserve attention." After the meeting, Kieran pulled me into his office, his expression stormy. "That was a warning. He knows who you are." "Or suspects," I countered, though fear coiled in my stomach. "Either way, we can use this. If I create the presentation, I'll have access to all the financial documents for the project. It's exactly the evidence we need. It's too dangerous. Marcus doesn't make empty threats, Maya. If he thinks you're a threat, then we'll have to make sure he doesn't think that," I interrupted. "I came here for justice, Kieran. I'm not backing down now. He moved closer, his hands gripping my shoulders gently. Your sister wouldn't want you to get hurt pursuing justice for her. My sister would want me to finish what she started, I replied, covering his hands with mine. And I think you know that. The tension between us shifted, becoming something heated and undeniable. Kieran's eyes darkened as they searched mine, and I saw the moment he stopped fighting whatever had been building between us. Maya, he breathed, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was everything I had tried not to imagine. Fierce and tender at the same time, full of unspoken feelings and denied attraction. His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer, and I responded by wrapping my arms around his neck, losing myself in the sensation. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Kieran rested his forehead against mine. This complicates things. Everything was already complicated, I whispered back. At least now we're being honest about it. The setup. Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into creating the presentation for Marcus's project, documenting every fraudulent detail while making it look like innocent work. Kieran provided additional security without making it obvious. A driver who happened to be ex-military, a new neighbor in my apartment building who was actually one of his security team, subtle protections that made me feel safer without feeling imprisoned. We worked late into the nights, ostensibly on the presentation but really building our case against Marcus. And somewhere in those long hours, amid the spreadsheets and evidence gathering, we stopped fighting our attraction and let ourselves feel. Tell me something real, Kieran said one night as we sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by papers and takeout containers. Something that has nothing to do with any of this. I thought for a moment. I wanted to be a painter when I was little. My parents thought it was impractical, so I compromised with graphic design. But sometimes I still dream about having a studio somewhere quiet, painting whatever I want without worrying about clients or deadlines. What would you paint? People, I said without hesitation. Their stories, their pain, their joy. Everything that makes them human. Kieran studied me with those intense gray eyes. You see people, don't you? Really see them. It's why you're so good at this. You look beyond the surface. What do you see when you look at me? I asked, emboldened by the late hour and our proximity. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising gentleness. I see someone who should have been broken by grief but chose strength instead. Someone who walked into a situation that terrified her, because she refused to let her sister's death be meaningless. I see courage, Maya. And beauty. And everything I didn't know I was looking for until you walked into that gala. His words undid something in me. I leaned forward, kissing him with all the emotion I had been trying to contain. This time we didn't pull away. We let the moment consume us, crossing a line we both knew we couldn't uncross. The betrayal revealed. The morning of the investor presentation, everything changed. I arrived at the office to find police cars surrounding the building and employees being evacuated. My heart dropped as I pushed through the crowd searching for Kieran. I found him in the lobby, talking intently with Detective Morrison, the same detective who had closed Sarah's case. When Kieran saw me, relief flooded his face, and he immediately moved to my side. What happened? I asked. Someone broke into the offices last night and attempted to destroy financial records, Detective Morrison explained. Security caught them in the act. And Miss Richardson, you're going to want to hear this. The person we arrested has been very cooperative. He's provided testimony that directly implicates Marcus Blackwood in fraud, money laundering, and... He paused, his expression grave. In the murder of Sarah Richardson. The world tilted. What? Mr. Stone provided us with substantial evidence of financial crimes, the detective continued. But the testimony we got last night connects Marcus to ordering the fire at your sister's apartment. He's being arrested as we speak. I looked at Kieran, questions swirling in my mind. You gave them the evidence? When? Last night after you left, he admitted. I couldn't wait any longer, Maya. Marcus had someone follow you home. I saw it on the security footage and I realized we were out of time. I contacted Detective Morrison and turned over everything we had. We were supposed to do this together, I said, feeling betrayed despite understanding his reasoning. I know and I'm sorry, but I couldn't risk you getting hurt. I promised myself when you walked into my life that I would keep you safe, even if it meant making decisions you might hate me for. Before I could respond, commotion erupted at the building's entrance. Marcus Blackwood was being led out in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage. When he saw Kieran and me standing together, understanding dawned in his eyes. You, he spat at me. You're Sarah's sister. I should have taken care of you when I had the chance. The admission was caught on multiple cameras, recorded for posterity. It was over. The man who had killed my sister had just confessed in front of dozens of witnesses. I felt Kieran's arm around me steady and strong, as I watched Marcus being placed in a police car. Justice finally. But it felt hollow somehow, incomplete. Sarah was still gone, and no arrest would bring her back. Aftermath and realization. The media coverage was intense for weeks. The story had everything: corporate fraud, murder, a dramatic arrest. I gave a statement to the police, provided Sarah's files as evidence, and tried to process the whirlwind of emotions that came with achieving the goal I'd been pursuing for months. Through it all, Kieran was there. Not pushing, not demanding, just present. Offering support when I needed it and space when I didn't. "How are you really?" he asked one evening as we sat on his penthouse terrace, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold and crimson. "Honestly, I don't know," I admitted. I thought getting justice for Sarah would feel different, more complete somehow. Instead, I just feel empty. Like I've been running on adrenaline for so long that now that it's over, I don't know who I am anymore. Kieran took my hand, lacing our fingers together. "You're Maya Richardson. You're strong and brave and stubborn as hell. You're someone who fought for her sister when no one else would. And that's not going to change just because the fight is over." "What happens now?" I asked, looking at our joined hands. "To us, I mean. We came together because of Sarah's case. Now that it's resolved, now we get to choose," Kieran said, turning to face me fully. "No more investigations, no more danger, no more pretending. Just us, figuring out if this thing between us is real, or if it was just circumstance and adrenaline. And if it is real?" His smile was slow and devastating. "Then we have something extraordinary. Because I've never met anyone who challenges me the way you do, Maya. Who sees through my walls and isn't afraid of what's underneath. Circumstance brought us together, but what I feel for you, that has nothing to do with any case or investigation. That's real." I searched his eyes and found only sincerity. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Everything in my life has revolved around finding Sarah's killer for so long. What if without that purpose I fall apart? Then I'll be there to help you put yourself back together," Kieran promised. "But Maya, I don't think you're going to fall apart. I think you're going to discover all the parts of yourself you couldn't explore while you were focused on revenge. And I really want to be there to see that." His words gave me courage. "Okay," I said softly. "Let's try. Let's see if this is real." Kieran's smile widened as he pulled me closer. And when he kissed me this time, it tasted like possibility and promise and new beginnings. Part 3: Rising from the Embers. New threats. 3 weeks after Marcus Blackwood's arrest, I learned that closure was more complicated than I had imagined. I was leaving my apartment early one morning when I noticed a black car parked across the street, the same car that had been there the previous evening. The same car I'd seen twice downtown the day before. I was being followed. My first call was to Kieran. He answered on the first ring, and I could hear the concern in his voice immediately. "Maya? What's wrong?" "There's a black sedan following me. It's been outside my apartment all night, and I think I saw it yesterday downtown." "Get back inside your apartment right now," he ordered, his tone brooking no argument. "Lock the door and don't open it for anyone except me. I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, Kieran arrived with 2 security personnel who swept my apartment while he paced my living room like a caged tiger. "Marcus is still in custody," he said, more to himself than to me. "But he has associates, people who might blame us for his arrest." "So what do we do?" I asked, fighting down the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. "You move in with me," Kieran said decisively. "My penthouse has better security, and I can keep you safe there." "Kieran, I can't just." "Yes, you can," he interrupted, taking my hands in his. "Maya, I'm not losing you. Not when we're finally getting a chance at something real. Please, let me protect you. The vulnerability in his eyes convinced me more than his words. Okay, I agreed. But we're partners in this, remember? No making decisions alone to protect me.